This morning, story's been breaking as we record. It happened yesterday. It only came across my desk this morning. And this was Chuck Todd of MSNBC taking clips from Attorney General Barr's CBS interview and editing it in a certain way. And Greg Price, who is from, I think, either Daily Caller or Washington Times, or Daily, no, it's
Daily Caller.
It is Daily Caller, yeah. He put them side by side so that everyone can see for themselves about the malfeasance and chicanery. Let's watch the clips side by side.
Peggy Noonan, I want you to listen to this Bill Barr answer to a question about what will history say about this. Wait till you hear this answer. Take a listen.
When history looks back on this decision, how do you think it will be written?
Well, history's written by the winners, so it largely depends on who's writing the history.
I was struck, Peggy, by the cynicism of the answer. It's a correct answer.
Okay, cynicism. Cynicism. Let's talk about cynicism. I'm reading right now one of the best books I've ever written. Look, some are great and some are excellent. It's the whole gamut. Some are the best and some are, though superb, not the best, but still superb. I am currently reading right now one of the best books I've ever read. And it was the sort of book where I was just 10 pages in and I'm like, this is going to be an absolute must-read home run and make my list of books everyone should read. And the reason I feel comfortable saying that so short into the book, I'm about, let's suppose, a third of the way through, quarter of the way through. It's by Arthur Herman. And Arthur Herman, who's been a repeat guest on You're Welcome, has written the book I consider to be the cure for the black pill, which is the idea of decline in Western history, which was his first book. And I made the joke when he was on my show, it's all downhill from there. And you're reading this book. The book is The Cave and the Light. And it's about Plato versus Aristotle and their ideas throughout history. And as you're reading this book, it is a love letter to the human mind. And Rand, the vampire novelist, had this great quote in The Fountainhead where the protagonist is giving his courtroom speech. And he starts off by saying, I'm going to paraphrase it, I don't know off the top of my head, thousands of years ago, a man discovered how to make fire. He was probably burned at the stake that he taught his brothers how to light, but still humanity moved forward. And you're reading this book, and there's so many things you and I take for granted as just knowledge. And then it goes, no. This was like Archimedes. This was a guy. We know who did it. And we know how and when. This is where he was, where he made this realization that has profoundly moved humanity forward. And as you're reading through the book, it's just like, again, you're dealing with like the Greeks, the classics, right, where they didn't have much technology. And the way they first realize, okay, this is a question I want to have an answer to, and then their workarounds to find that data is just awe-inspiring. And as you read, and the way Herman writes it to kind of dumb it down, I'm going to use that word very loosely, to language that anyone can understand, these high concepts, it's just a tour de force. It's just amazing. And one of the things he talks about is the cynics, which do not have the meaning that they have today. Cynicism in contemporary loose jargon is the idea that like, people tend to do things that are weak and cheap and crappy. And it's something I'm very opposed to. My great hero, Albert Camus, made that his big enemy is cynicism. And it kind of gives you a sense of hopelessness, because even if 99 people are horrible and will act in very crappy ways, they don't matter compared to that 100th person. It's not a numbers game. When you go to the store, and it's not one bad apple ruins the bunch. If all the apples are rotten and there's one good one, okay, I'm going to get the good one and have a good apple. Case closed. Cynicism, is just ironic that he's referring to cynicism when what we're watching here is shameless and deceptive and manipulative and transparently so. So not only is it cynical to call what he's doing, not only is what he's doing cynical, it's also cynical that he's calling somebody else cynical. Let's finish this off.
Cynicism of the answer. It's a correct answer, but he's the Attorney General. He didn't make the case that he was upholding the rule of law. He was almost admitting that, yeah, this is a political job.
When history looks back
Here's the clip.
on this decision, how do you think it will be written?
Well, history's written by the winners, so it largely depends on who's writing the history. But I think a fair history would say it was a good decision because it upheld the rule of law. It upheld the standards of the Department of Justice, and it undid what was an injustice. One
of my adages is anything preceding but in a political claim can be ignored. So he makes the maybe unnecessary joke. You know, what's history going to say? Oh, I don't know. History's written by the winners. But I think this was a good decision. Notice they cut his answer mid-sentence. There was no possibility they didn't see the full clip. There is no possibility that they didn't understand what he was saying. This reminds me of Walter Block, who is from the Mises Institute, a very failed think tank. And he did an interview with the New York Times. I brought up this example several times. And he said, slavery wasn't bad because they were working in the fields and singing songs. It was bad because they were prisoners. They were, held captive. They were taken away from their families. They had no human rights. I forget how the end of the sentence was or something to that effect. And the New York Times just wrote, slavery wasn't bad because they were working in the fields and singing songs. And he sued them correctly. The point is, that's not a mistake. If you are a reporter, if you're any human and you see that full sentence, those clauses are not being perceived independently. It's impossible for someone who is, no, it's just impossible to look at that sentence in its totality, to hear it when you're talking one-on-one and misconstrue what the person is saying, number one. And let's pretend you forget English. Maybe it's your second language as it is mine. You would say, whoa, 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 whoa. Did you just say slavery isn't bad? Because that's interesting. Talk about that. No. Let him talk. Oh, I've got my quote. This reminds me of when I was interviewing Jared Taylor for my book, who's the head of American Renaissance. And he was condemning many members of the alt-right. And he said, I put the sound clip on the internet. The idea in this day and age that Hitlerism would be a model for America is simply fantastic. And I go, you mean crazy? He's like, oh, yes, thank you for the clarification. But he said it. I could have very easily said, oh, he says Hitler's fantastic. And that's an extreme case because his use of the word fantastic is not a common use. But here, this isn't unclear. So here's what the Department of Justice spokesperson, Kerry Kubek, she wrote, very disappointed by deceptive editing / commentary by Chuck Todd. Compare the two transcripts below. Not only did the Attorney General make the case in the very answer Chuck says he didn't, he also did so multiple times throughout the interview. In response, the Meet the Press Twitter account posted, "You're correct. Earlier, we inadvertently," Michael Cernovich tweeted out, "inadvertently strikes again." It's not inadvertent. It's not inadvertent. It cannot be inadvertent when you are misconstruing what someone is saying. We inadvertently and inaccurately cut short a video clip of an interview. You know what it's like? Are they saying that they got to get a clip ready for Chuck Todd's show? They're watching the video. It's like, oh, my plane's leaving right now. Let's just stop listening now. How? If you're editing, you have to hear the whole sentence because that's where the breaks are. Before offering commentary analysis, the remaining clip included important remarks from the Attorney General that we missed, and we regret the error. We missed. So you saw the clips. It's not like he said, well, history's written by the winners. He threw down a cloud of smoke, and then he changed shape and color and was part of the wall, and they're like, it's like highlights for kids. You got to circle, find the fox in the tree, and where's the teapot? We missed it. I mean, it was hidden with all the background noise and all the, flashing lights, which gives people epilepsy. It was hard to see what he was saying, the next sentence, the next second in that clip. The show did not say it would apologize on air. NBC News did not respond to Fox's request for comments about a request for an apology on air either. If you're an organization who is constantly unfairly being attacked by the president as fake news, when you are honest people who are trying to provide information when we're under the subject of some evil regime, and a mistake like this happens, you are going to bend over backwards to make sure that it doesn't happen again and that people understand it was a one-off. Think about incidences where companies had to recall a product. Potato chips, medicine, Jack in the Box had a thing with salmonella many years ago. Huge ad campaigns. It's safe. Here's our new process, transparency. Not, oh, here's a rando tweet. That's not how it works. Molly Hemingway, who is the best, wrote, "A tweet in no way covers the error. A lot of people are rightly angry at Chuck Todd for willfully lying about Attorney General's comments on rule of law, but Joe NBC also did it days ago. These intentional lies in service of false narratives have gone on for years. Infuriating." This is referencing to Joe Scarborough sharing a debunked, deceptively edited clip of Mike Pence handling boxes. They were empty boxes, and he joked, "Oh, these boxes are empty," but they made it out like he was trying to lie. Okay. President Trump tweeted out, "Sleepy eyes Chuck Todd should be fired," and said that Chuck Todd knew exactly what he was doing. It is not possible. So there's two scenarios. Let's suppose this is possible. Chuck Todd's editor made that mistake. So Chuck Todd didn't see the full interview. The editor made that mistake, and as a consequence, Chuck was dishonest about what the Attorney General had to say. Chuck Todd, in that case, would make sure that person's fired immediately, and correctly so. Can you imagine if you're a copy editor for a newspaper article and you change what the reporter had said? You think you wouldn't be called up to HR and fired immediately and with cause? Immediately.